On an early section of the West Highland Way, some 11 miles from the start of Mulgai, lies a small area called Drumquhassle. Despite the unusual spelling, the name means simply the Castle Hill, and the castle it refers to is a small Roman auxiliary fort. Few walkers on the West Highland Way are aware of this auxiliary fort as they hike past. There are no remains above the ground now and no signage to indicate its position. However, Drumcastle stands as a powerful piece of evidence in a long defensive system which began here in the southwest of ancient Caledonia and extended as far north and east as Bertha, or modern-day Perth. This defensive system consisted of a series of auxiliary forts, watchtowers, and a single massive legion fortress, all backed up by a paved military road. This is known today as the Gask Ridge frontier and has been fully argued by historians and archaeologists to be the first formed defensive system to be developed by the Roman Empire. Evidence exists to show that many of the structures were rebuilt over time, showing continuous occupation and refurbishment. The fort and tower planks were made from oak, pre-planed, and shipped over from the Rhine frontier almost as kit parts. Much of the native Caledonian woodland at the time was unsuitable for long-term wooden construction, and so the Roman engineers and woodworkers relied upon imported planks instead. What we are looking at now is a Roman defensive system built some 40 years before Hadrian's War, one which secured the wide lowlands south of the Highland Mountains and is arguably the first linear line built by the empire to divide territory between itself and the tribes beyond. Here at Drumcastle we find a typical auxiliary fort. This fort occupies a high ridge which overlooks a strategic location. Archaeologists refer to it as a Glen Blocker fort. Its location allows the garrison here to observe and dominate the high glens east and north, while also watching the wide expanse of Loch Lomond. Standing at about 1.3 hectares in size, this identifies Drumcastle as an auxiliary fort, holding the usual 480 auxiliary soldiers. It would have been a timber and turf construction, surrounded by a double ditch. There is nothing now to be seen on the ground except for a low suggestion of the external ramparts. The fort's annex and a possible cluster of native circular huts to the north has now been destroyed by modern quarrying work. Trial excavation has confirmed that the fort measured approximately 110 metres by 130 metres over the rampart. There was only one period of occupation at the end of which the defences were deliberately slighted and the location evacuated. Topsoil and material from the ditches and layers above the waterlogged deposits had been dumped on the northern annex beside the quarry section. Finds from the surface of the spoiled tips include sherds of Samian ware, mortaria, amphora, coarse greyware and redware. One sherd of a terra nigra platter was also recovered, as were shards of glass and a glass bead. Among the other finds are two small flint blades. Other finds have included coins of the emperors Titus and Domitian, reinforcing the suspected 1st century AD date of the fort, clay slingshot, a possible surgical instrument, the terminal of a patera stamped for P. Cipius Polybius, a copper alloy harness mount and lead weight, Samian, amphora, and coarse pottery. A number of artifacts were also picked up from molehills inside the southeast quadrant of the fort, including sling bullets similar to those already recovered from the same part of the site, and an enamelled Roman brooch dated to the 1st century. Using the drone here allows a viewer to appreciate the excellent sight lines the auxiliary fort holds. The drone now is roughly positioned as if it were an auxiliary standing in the northeast corner turret. Loch Lomond is clearly visible 3 miles to the west. The fort also controls the Endrick water valley to the east, while southeast lies another river valley known now as Strathblane, backed up by the high natural ramparts of the Campsie Fells, or the Fairy Hills, in the distance. About 50 metres to the east of the fort, faint traces of a 20-metre squared rectangular enclosure were found around a copious spring feeding into the nearby Altkeher burn. This is the closest water source to the site. At present, there is no evidence to confirm a Roman date, but this enclosure could represent a springhead structure of some sort. There is speculation that it might possibly be a shrine, similar to that of Covertina's well at the Hadrian's Wall fort of Carabruff. The spring here is unusual in that it has the remarkable reputation of never having dried out, despite the droughts which sometimes occur here in the lowlands. Current academic opinion suggests this auxiliary fort was built in the early 70s AD and occupied for roughly 20 years. It stood as the most known southwesterly edge of the Gask Ridge frontier. In AD 86, pressure along the Danube region saw the Emperor Domitian recall vast numbers of Roman troops to defend an area which was not far from the Italian heartlands. As a result, one legion was withdrawn from Britannia, along with a number of auxiliary cohorts. By AD 90, the entire Gask Ridge area had been evacuated. Drumquhassle, along with most of the forts and watchtowers, including the legion fortress itself, were all dismantled. As far as is known, no Gask Ridge fort or tower was burnt or destroyed in military action. All were slighted in an organised and efficient manner. This reinforces the notion of an orderly withdrawal under the Emperor's orders due to pressure elsewhere. The intended occupation of lowland Caledonia was shelved, and in time a new stone frontier would be erected far to the south, named after the Emperor Hadrian. So if you find yourself hiking along this section of the West Highland Way in the future, pause for a moment and look around at this empty field and remember the 480 or so auxiliaries who once stood here for some 20 years and guarded this first frontier of Rome so long ago.